Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Napoleon, and today we're going to be doing another enlisted event squad review, and this is going to be the 19th Separate Tank Brigade of the 16th Army for the Soviet Union. This is obviously the milk truck now we have in game, so that's going to be interesting, and of course, all the research and stuff I'm going to be talking about and experiences are going to be coming with the help of the Discord, meaning if you haven't liked, subscribe, or joined the Discord, highly suggest that you join. But that said, let's get started. First thing we have to talk about before we even start is the history. The 16th Army headquarters was formed in July of 1940 in the Trans-Baikal Military District of Command of Soviet forces deployed in the Darya area on May 25, 1941, 4 weeks after the commencement of the German invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. The army was then received orders to deploy on the Trans-Baikalian divisions to Ukraine to the subsequent Kiev Military Special District. After the commencement of Operation Barbarossa, a crisis situation developed on the western sector of the frontier, and on the 26th of June, the army was then deployed to the Orsa-Smolensk area. After the breakthrough of the German mechanized troops in Smolensk on the 14th, Marshal Timoshenko ordered Lukin, the commander of the 16th Army, to take all units to garrison the city of Smolensk, and until units arrived by rail, the defense sector was directly adjacent to the city. On the 20th of July, the 129th Rifles Division lost 40% of the strength while defending Smolensk, of which the 129th was part of the 16th Army. The 16th Army then continued to have severe battle situations in Smolensk, and the Army headquarters was then disbanded on the 8th of August 1941 after encirclement at the Battle of Smolensk. Thus, the unit comes to an end in its first phase, and then it was reconstructed on the Western Front on the 10th of August 1941. Of the 16th Army was then created under the Warsaw Front and placed under the command of Rokossovsky, who was this time Major General. In September 1941, which is the current unit that we have, the newly promoted General Rokossovsky was then tasked with the defense of the Voroshilov Highway and to prevent any advances of German forces towards Moscow. By late November, the 16th Army has been forced to the Krasnaya Postnaya line, but it held firm until the Red Army went on the offensive in December. In January 1942, the Army conducted offensives in the Krasnoyarsk axis, and on the 11th, the German forces mounted a surprise offensive on the western flank, splitting the 61st and 16th Armies on the Revenge salient. The German forces then encircled Bragadin's right flank and then received quickly to essentially halt their advances. Until the May of 1943, the troops of this army conducted defensive and offensive battles in the Zydrinsky district axis. On the May 1st, 1943, the Stavka, the Army High Command, was then reorganized into the 11th Guards Army on the Western Front. Hence, the 11th Guards replaced the 16th Army. Not for long, because this time it was formed on July 10th, 1943 in the Far Eastern Front based on the Special Rifle Corps. From the spring of 1945, the army was responsible for the defense of the Soviet Eastern Front with the island of Sakhalin and along the mainland coast of the Tartar Strait to Amur. During the Soviet-Japanese War and the convention of the Russian Pacific Fleet, the 16th Army advanced into the Japanese-held Sakhalin Islands in the invasion of the South Sakhalins, and this force was then involved in the invasion of the Kuril Islands, and on October 1st, 1945, the army was then subordinate to the Far Eastern Military District, and within a month after that, it was then disbanded. Needless to say, this army served almost every single front, with the exception of the Northern Front and Southern Front, in regards to Leningrad and Stalingrad, and it did even serve in the Far East. But that said, let's talk about the weapon itself. The 25mm air defense gun, the 75K, was developed in 1939 and 1940. It was a very common anti-aircraft gun in the Soviet Union, at roughly about 5,000 units produced. It requires an immediate position between large caliber anti-aircraft guns of the ANC and the powerful 37mm anti-aircraft gun of K-61. This vehicle was designed for infantry regimental level air defense, basically short-mounted air defense. The gun was created at the beginning of 1940 at the 8th Kalinin artillery plant under the guidance of the chief designer. To increase mobility of the second part of 1941, the 75K anti-aircraft gun was then installed on the chassis of a GATS MM. which was essentially a Soviet milk truck, with a medium usage weight of 1.5 tons. It was produced at the end of the 1930s, the GATS MM, and as part of the 1940s by the Soviet Union, it was then used with a simplified Model AA Ford license plate. But at the beginning of World War II, more than 1,500,000 were used by the Red Army. Tests showed the success of the design and the gun mount, so it was put into serial production and called GATS MM75K, or if you're Russian, GAZ MM75K. However, only 200 were produced, and the manufacturer company was evacuated during the invasion, and subsequently the GATS MM75K was no longer produced. In terms of the stats, the GAZ MM75K has a 25mm 72K gun, has 0 armor on the front, 0 armor on the back, 0 armor on the side, and the turret only has 7mm of front armor, and has a crew of 4, which means this thing is probably worse than the German Flak Panzer, and that's putting it mildly. In terms of the usage, I highly suggest that you drive backwards, because for some reason, the GAT 75mm, you cannot use it on the front, and what I mean by the front is that it can't be depressed, so that's gonna be very bad. It has no armor, and the speed is also not great because it has no armor, hence this thing is practically suicidal. The 4-man crew is not the best, considering the fact that the 4-man crew is unprotected and snipers can take this thing out. It has a decent gun, but compared to the Soviet starting tank, I would not use this thing. The Soviet starting tank is much better than this tank in almost every category in terms of armor. Essentially, almost every dimension, this is much better than this thing right here. The GAT 72M is one of those things that you just essentially want to throw out, and these things are disgustingly terrible. But that's it, that's all it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the Discord. I highly suggest that you comment in the video below, and I'll see you in the next one.